This bathroom isn't for passengers like you." The words hit Dr. Celeste Bryant like a physical blow. Jessica Martinez, the blonde flight attendant blocking the narrow airplane aisle, didn't even blink when she said it. Her voice cut through the recycled cabin air with practiced authority, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear every syllable. She looked directly at the black woman in the navy blazer and made her decision. What Jessica didn't know was that in exactly 8 minutes, the woman standing in front of her would trigger a phone call from the Federal Aviation Administration that would end her career forever. Before we dive deeper, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you've ever been denied something you had every right to, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because what happens next will shock you. Dr. Celeste Bryant had taken this exact flight from Phoenix to Atlanta dozens of times. Phoenix Airlines Flight 847, Seat 18C. Always the aisle for easy access to her work. Today was different, though. Today was supposed to be a celebration. After 15 years as one of the FAA's most trusted aerospace medicine consultants, she was finally taking a vacation with her husband, Robert. Robert Torres, 52, sat beside her in 18B, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed case files. 25 years as a corporate attorney had taught him to work anywhere, even at 35,000 feet. His silver hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the cabin windows. He looked up as Celeste shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "You okay, mi amor?" he asked quietly, using the Spanish endearment that always made her smile. Celeste nodded, but her face showed strain. The new medication she'd started for her autoimmune condition came with side effects, sudden, intense pressure that required immediate attention. She'd read the warnings, understood the pharmacology, but experiencing it was different. This wasn't a casual urge. This was becoming urgent. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The illuminated sign above had been turned off for the past hour. Passengers moved freely about the cabin. Flight attendants served drinks and snacks. Everything was normal except for the growing discomfort that made her breathing shallow. "I'll be right back," she told Robert, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. Celeste made her way down the aisle toward the rear lavatory. She preferred not to use the first-class bathroom closer to the front, a matter of principle and politeness. Her navy blazer was wrinkled from the 3-hour flight, her silver jewelry caught the overhead lights, and her confident stride spoke of someone comfortable in professional spaces. That's when she met Jessica Martinez. Jessica stood guard by the galley clipboard in hand blonde ponytail pulled back so tightly it stretched her features. At 29, she carried herself with the kind of authority that comes from wearing a uniform and having just enough power to make someone's day miserable. Her smile was practiced, perfect, and completely empty. "Excuse me," Celeste said politely as she approached. "I need to use the restroom." Jessica stepped sideways, blocking the path. That's when she delivered the words that would change both their lives forever. "This bathroom isn't for passengers like you." The cabin seemed to stop breathing. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A businessman looked up from his laptop. A mother turned from entertaining her children. The words hung in the air like smoke from a crashed plane. Celeste blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry." What Jessica's smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. "The lavatory is being prepared for priority passengers. You'll need to wait." "Priority passengers?" Celeste kept her voice level, professional. Years of dealing with aviation bureaucracy had taught her to stay calm when others lost control. "What do you mean? First-class passengers, frequent flyers, people who've earned the privilege?" Jessica's tone was matter-of-fact, like she was explaining airline safety procedures. "This bathroom serves the premium cabin overflow." Celeste glanced at the lavatory door. No out-of-order sign. No maintenance issues. The vacant indicator showed green. Other passengers had used it freely during the flight. She looked back at Jessica, studying her face, reading the micro-expressions that revealed the truth. This wasn't about bathroom protocols. This was about something else entirely. "I'm in seat 18C, Celeste said calmly. "I'm a paying passenger on this flight. I have the same rights as everyone else." Jessica's laugh was sharp-cutting. "Rights? Honey, this is an airplane. I make the rules up here." The exchange had attracted attention. Maria Gonzalez in seat 19A fumbled for her phone. Tom Wilson in 20B closed his laptop, sensing something important happening. Elena Vasquez, 2 rows behind, paused her conversation with her teenage daughter. Celeste felt the familiar fire building in her chest, not anger but determination. She'd faced discrimination before. At 25, trying to get her first consulting contract. At 30, proving herself in rooms full of men who questioned her expertise. At 35, fighting for recognition in a field dominated by people who looked nothing like her, but never on an airplane, never in the industry she'd helped shape and protect. "I understand you have protocols," Celeste said, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "But I also have a medical situation that requires immediate attention. May I please use the restroom?" Jessica's expression shifted, the mask slipping for just a moment. Celeste caught it. The flash of something ugly, something that had been hiding behind the professional smile. "Medical situation?" Jessica's voice dripped with skepticism. What kind of medical situation? The question itself was a violation. Passengers weren't required to explain their bodily functions to flight attendants. But Celeste answered anyway, maintaining her dignity. "Medication side effects. I need to use the facilities immediately." Jessica looked her up and down, a deliberate assessment that took in every detail. Dark skin, braided hair, confident posture, professional attire that didn't scream wealth or status. In Jessica's mind, the calculation was simple: this woman didn't look like someone who mattered. "I don't see any medical alert bands," Jessica said. "No service animal, no documentation. Sounds like you're just trying to cut in line." Cut in line. Celeste's composure cracked slightly. "There is no line. The bathroom is empty. And it's staying that way until I say otherwise." That's when Robert Torres appeared beside his wife. His lawyer instincts had kicked in the moment he noticed her prolonged absence. One look at the confrontation told him everything he needed to know. "Is there a problem here?" His voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. Jessica sized him up quickly. Hispanic male, well-dressed, protective stance. Potential ally or another problem to manage. "No problem," she said sweetly. "Just explaining our bathroom protocols to your wife." "Bathroom protocols?" Robert's eyebrows raised. "What protocols would those be?" The question hung in the air as more passengers turned to watch. Jessica realized she was losing control of the narrative, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "Priority access policies," she said firmly. "Some passengers get privileges, others wait their turn." Robert Torres had spent his career recognizing discrimination wrapped in policy language. He knew it when he heard it. "And what determines priority?" he asked quietly. Jessica's pause lasted 2 seconds too long. Cabin class. Frequent flyer status. Special assistance needs. "My wife has special assistance needs," Robert said. "Medical necessity," as she explained. "Everyone says they have medical needs." Jessica snapped, her professional veneer finally cracking. "It's the oldest trick in the book." The words echoed through the cabin. Passengers within earshot looked shocked. Maria Gonzalez had her phone out now, recording. Tom Wilson stood up in his seat to get a better view. Celeste placed a gentle hand on Robert's arm. She could feel his protective anger building, but escalation wasn't the answer. Not yet. "It's okay," she told him softly. Then she looked directly at Jessica. "I'll remember this conversation." Something in her tone made Jessica's confident smile falter. There was no threat, no raised voice, just a quiet promise that sent a chill down the flight attendant's spine. But Jessica was too committed to her power play to step back now. "Remember whatever you want," she said. "The bathroom stays closed until I say it opens." That's when Celeste Bryant made the decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone. The pain was getting worse. What had started as mild discomfort was becoming sharp, urgent pressure that made Celeste's breathing shallow. The new immunosuppressant medication came with a long list of side effects, but the diuretic impact was the most challenging. When it hit fast and without mercy. Dr. Celeste Bryant understood the pharmacology better than most patients. She'd studied the drug interactions, monitored her response, adjusted her daily schedule to accommodate the unpredictable urgency. But you can't schedule turbulence. You can't plan for flight delays. And you certainly can't predict when a flight attendant will decide you don't deserve basic human dignity. "Ma'am, I really do have a medical emergency," Celeste said, keeping her voice low and professional. "I'm not trying to cause problems. I just need 30 seconds of access." Jessica Martinez crossed her arms, her clipboard pressed against her chest like armor. "Medical emergency. Where's your medical alert bracelet? Where's your doctor's note? Where's your special assistant's paperwork?" The questions were ridiculous, and Jessica knew it. No passenger needed documentation to use an airplane bathroom, but she'd found her angle of attack and she was going to ride it until Celeste gave up and walked away. "I don't need paperwork to use the restroom," Celeste replied calmly. "That's not how commercial aviation works." "Don't tell me how aviation works," Jessica snapped. "I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know the rules." 8 years. Celeste filed that information away. 8 years of interactions with passengers. 8 years of making judgment calls. 8 years of deciding who deserved respect and who didn't. The pattern was starting to become clear. Robert Torres watched the exchange with growing alarm. His wife's discomfort was obvious to anyone paying attention. Her breathing had changed. Her posture was strained, and a light sheen of perspiration had appeared on her forehead despite the cool cabin air. "Jessica," he said, reading her name tag, "my wife has explained the situation. She's being polite and reasonable." "What exactly is the issue here?" Jessica turned her attention to Robert, grateful to shift focus away from Celeste's obvious distress. "The issue, sir, is that we're beginning our descent preparations. Captain Rodriguez has requested that we secure the cabin." It was a complete lie, and Robert knew it. He glanced at his watch. They were still 90 minutes from Atlanta. The seatbelt sign was off. Flight attendants were actively serving beverages 3 rows away. No part of Jessica's story made sense. Descent preparations, Robert kept his tone neutral, lawyerly. "Could you explain what specific preparations require bathroom access to be restricted?" Jessica hesitated. She hadn't expected to be cross-examined. Safety protocols, passenger movement restrictions, standard procedure. Standard procedure according to which FAA regulation, Robert pressed gently. The question hit Jessica like a slap. She didn't know FAA regulations beyond the basic safety briefing she'd memorized years ago. She just knew she had authority, and she was going to use it. "I don't have to quote regulations to passengers," she said defensively. "I just have to enforce them." Maria Gonzalez in seat 19A had been watching the entire confrontation unfold. As a high school teacher from Tucson, she'd seen enough bullying to recognize it instantly. This wasn't about bathroom protocols or safety procedures. This was about power and prejudice, plain and simple. She discreetly started recording on her phone. "Excuse me," Maria interjected politely. "I used that same bathroom 20 minutes ago. There were no restrictions then." Jessica whipped around to face Maria. "That was before we received new instructions from the cockpit." "What instructions?" Tom Wilson asked from seat 20B. The software engineer from Dallas had been listening to the exchange while pretending to work on his laptop. "I didn't hear any announcements." Jessica's face was flushing, now red splotches appearing on her neck as more passengers joined the conversation. Not all instructions are announced to the cabin, but bathroom restrictions would be, Elena Vasquez said from 2 rows behind. She was traveling with her 16-year-old daughter to visit family in Atlanta. Both had flown enough to know airline procedures. Flight attendants always announce when facilities are unavailable. Celeste watched the support building around her with gratitude and growing hope. But the physical situation was becoming desperate. The medication's effects were intensifying, and she could feel her body reaching the point where dignity might not be maintainable much longer. "Jessica," she said firmly, "I'm going to ask you one more time. May I please use the restroom? I have a genuine medical need." Jessica looked around the cabin, realizing she'd created a spectacle. Dozens of passengers were now watching, listening, forming opinions. Some had phones out. The situation was spiraling beyond her control. But instead of de-escalating, Jessica doubled down. "No," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You may not. And if you keep pushing this issue, I'll have to file a report for non-compliant passenger behavior." The threat was breathtaking in its cruelty. Celeste stared at Jessica, seeing something she'd encountered too many times before. Someone drunk on the smallest taste of power, willing to cause suffering to maintain their sense of superiority. Robert's legal mind was cataloging every word, every violation, every witness statement that would be needed later. But his husband's heart was breaking watching his wife's humiliation. "This is ridiculous," he said, his calm finally cracking. "You're denying a passenger basic bathroom access based on what personal bias? Arbitrary power games. I'm enforcing airline policy," Jessica shot back. "If you don't like it, file a complaint when we land." "Oh, we will," Celeste said quietly, "but not the kind of complaint you're expecting." There was something in her tone that made Jessica pause. Not anger, not threats, just absolute certainty. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly what was about to happen. "Are you threatening me?" Jessica demanded. "No," Celeste replied calmly. "I'm informing you." The distinction was lost on Jessica, but not on the passengers watching. Maria Gonzalez continued recording, capturing every word. Tom Wilson was taking notes on his phone. Elena Vasquez whispered translations to her daughter in rapid Spanish. Celeste placed a gentle hand on Robert's arm. She could feel his protective anger building, but escalation wasn't the answer. "Not yet. It's okay," she told him softly. Then she looked directly at Jessica. "I'll remember this conversation." Something in her tone made Jessica's confident smile falter. There was no threat, no raised voice, just a quiet promise that sent a chill down the flight attendant's spine. But Jessica was too committed to her power play to step back now. "Remember whatever you want," she said. "The bathroom stays closed until I say it opens." That's when Celeste Bryant made the decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone. Jessica Martinez watched Celeste pull out her phone with growing alarm. Something about the black woman's calm confidence was unsettling. Most passengers, when faced with crew authority, either backed down or got loud and belligerent. Celeste was doing neither. She was methodical, deliberate, like someone following a well-rehearsed plan. "Ma'am, you can't make phone calls during flight," Jessica said quickly, grasping for any rule she could enforce. "Please put your device away." Celeste looked up at her with eyes that held no anger, just determination. "Actually, I can. We're above 10,000 feet with the captain's approval for electronic devices. Your airline's own announcement confirmed it." The precision of the response told Jessica she was dealing with someone who understood aviation regulations better than she did. That realization sent a chill down her spine. Carmen Lopez stepped closer, her experienced eyes reading the situation with growing concern. "Jessica, what exactly happened here? Passenger was being difficult about bathroom access." Jessica said, her voice less certain now. I explained our policies, but she wouldn't listen. What policies? Carmen asked sharply. We don't restrict bathroom access during normal flight operations. Maria Gonzalez continued recording from her seat, making sure to capture the senior flight attendant's obvious confusion. This was no longer just a dispute between a passenger and crew member. This was a supervisor discovering her employee had gone rogue. Tom Wilson stood up in the aisle, his 6-foot frame giving him a clear view over other passengers. I witnessed the entire conversation, he announced loudly. The flight attendant denied bathroom access based on what she called priority passenger policies. Elena Vasquez nodded in agreement. She said the bathroom was only for first-class passengers and frequent flyers. Carmen's face darkened. There were no such policies. Jessica had invented them on the spot, which meant this was either a massive training failure or something much worse. Is this true? Carmen demanded. Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound. She'd expected passenger complaints to be handled quietly after landing filed away in corporate bureaucracy, forgotten within days. She hadn't expected public confrontation, supervisor involvement, or the kind of immediate accountability that was building around her. I was following protocols, she finally managed. What protocols? Carmen's voice was ice cold now. Quote them. Chapter and verse. Celeste continued holding her phone, watching the exchange with fascination. In her years consulting for airlines, she'd seen crew training, reviewed policies, analyzed incident reports. Never had she witnessed such a complete breakdown of basic customer service standards. Robert Torres placed a protective hand on his wife's shoulder. Celeste, maybe we should just find another bathroom. No, she said quietly. This isn't about the bathroom anymore. Her words carried to the passengers nearby, and several nodded in understanding. This had become about something bigger than bathroom access. This was about respect, dignity, and the abuse of authority. Mike Thompson, the junior flight attendant, appeared from the forward galley with a drink cart. At 25, he was new enough to the job to still believe in treating all passengers with equal courtesy. He took one look at the crowd gathered around Jessica and knew something was seriously wrong. What's going on? He asked Carmen quietly. Jessica denied bathroom access to a passenger, Carmen replied. Claims it was policy. Mike's forehead wrinkled in confusion. What policy? We don't have bathroom restrictions. The comment was overheard by several passengers, adding to the mounting evidence that Jessica had acted entirely on her own authority. Jessica realized the walls were closing in. Her fellow crew members were contradicting her story. Passengers were recording her every word. Her supervisor looked ready to suspend her on the spot. Time for desperate measures. Look, she said, raising her voice to address the growing audience. I know this passenger type. They make demands, claim medical emergencies, threaten lawsuits when they don't get their way. I was just trying to maintain order. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock and outrage. Passenger type Robert's lawyer instincts were fully engaged now. What type would that be? Jessica realized she'd said too much, revealed too much of her thinking. But she was committed to her course now, no matter how badly it was going. You know what I mean, she said defensively. No, Tom Wilson called out from his seat. We don't know what you mean. Please explain. Maria Gonzalez adjusted her phone to capture Jessica's face clearly. Yes, please explain what type of passenger this is. Elena Vasquez translated the conversation for her daughter in whispered Spanish, her voice tight with anger. Celeste watched Jessica's growing desperation with something approaching pity. The flight attendant had dug herself into a hole so deep that every word only made it worse. But instead of apologizing, instead of admitting her mistake, Jessica was doubling down on her prejudice. It was exactly the kind of behavior that would need to be reported to the proper authorities. Carmen Lopez had heard enough. Jessica, you need to step away from this situation immediately. I'm taking over." "I can handle this," Jessica protested. "No, you can't," Carmen replied firmly. "You've already made it worse." Jessica's face flushed with embarrassment and rage. Being corrected in front of passengers was the ultimate humiliation for someone who'd built her identity around having authority over travelers. "Fine," she snapped. "But when corporate gets complaints about passenger behavior, don't blame me." The threat was directed at Celeste, but it landed wrong. Several passengers laughed out loud at the absurdity of Jessica claiming to be the victim in this situation. Celeste finally spoke, her voice cutting through the noise with quiet authority. "There won't be any complaints about passenger behavior," she said. "But there will definitely be reports filed about crew conduct." Jessica's confident mask finally slipped completely. "Reports? What kind of reports? The kind that end careers?" Celeste replied simply. The cabin fell silent. Even the background hum of the engines seemed to quiet as passengers absorbed the implications of those words. Jessica stared at Celeste, really seeing her for the first time. Not just a difficult passenger to be managed, but someone with knowledge connections and power she couldn't begin to understand. Who are you?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Celeste smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the expression of someone who'd been underestimated one too many times. "Someone you should have treated with respect," she said. Then she dialed the number that would change both their lives forever. Celeste's finger moved across her phone screen with the precision of someone who'd made this type of call before. The number wasn't in her regular contacts. It was memorized, reserved for true emergencies, and connected directly to the Federal Aviation Administration's Emergency Compliance Hotline, FAA Emergency Response. "This is Agent Martinez speaking." The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, immediately alert. In the background, Celeste could hear keyboards clicking multiple conversations, the controlled chaos of a federal response center that never slept. "This is Dr. Celeste Bryant, Consultant Authorization Code 7734. Celeste said clearly, loudly enough for Jessica and the surrounding passengers to hear every word. "I'm filing a real-time discrimination violation report aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847, currently en route from Phoenix to Atlanta." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Jessica's face went white as printer paper. Carmen Lopez's eyes widened in recognition of the name. Mike Thompson dropped his serving tray, sending plastic cups clattering to the floor. Even passengers who hadn't been paying attention turned to stare. Dr. Bryant, Agent Martinez's voice sharpened with recognition. "Please confirm your current status and location. I'm a passenger in seat 18C aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847. I'm being denied basic bathroom access by flight attendant Jessica Martinez based on what appears to be racial discrimination disguised as airline policy." Jessica's knees went weak. She grabbed the seat back in front of her for support, her clipboard dropping to the floor with a loud clatter. The FAA. This woman was calling the FAA during the flight, while it was happening. Carmen Lopez stepped forward urgently. "Ma'am, perhaps we can resolve this without involving—" Celeste held up a hand, still speaking into her phone. "The crew member in question has denied bathroom access to a passenger with documented medical needs, cited false airline policies, threatened to file false reports about passenger non-compliance, and made statements that suggest discriminatory intent." "Copy that, Dr. Bryant. I'm escalating this immediately to Flight Operations and Civil Rights Enforcement. Can you confirm the aircraft tail number and current flight status?" Celeste looked out the window, reading the wing markings with practiced ease. "Aircraft tail number N847PX, approximately 90 minutes from Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson. Flight appears normal except for the civil rights violation in progress." Jessica made a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. She'd heard of these calls before. They were legendary in aviation circles, the kind of thing that ended careers and triggered federal investigations. She just never thought she'd be on the receiving end of one. Robert Torres watched with professional admiration as his wife documented the incident with federal precision. This wasn't just a complaint call. This was evidence-gathering, witness protection, and accountability enforcement all rolled into one. Maria Gonzalez continued recording, capturing Jessica's complete breakdown as the reality of her situation hit home. Tom Wilson was frantically taking notes on his phone. Elena Vasquez had stopped translating for her daughter and was just staring in fascination at the destruction of a career. Dr. Bryant Agent Martinez continued, "We're contacting the aircraft immediately. Please remain on the line while we coordinate with the flight crew and file preliminary documentation." "Understood," Celeste replied. "I have multiple passenger witnesses who can confirm the details of this incident." Carmen Lopez stepped closer, her voice urgent and pleading. "Dr. Bryant, please. Let me handle this internally. Jessica made a mistake, but surely we can work this out without accountability." Celeste's voice was calm but implacable. "Without consequences, without ensuring this doesn't happen to the next passenger who doesn't have an FAA hotline number in their phone." The questions hung in the air like accusations. Carmen realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, a passenger with the knowledge, authority, and connections to hold an airline immediately accountable for discriminatory behavior. Jessica finally found her voice, though it came out as a croak. "Please, I didn't know. You were just discriminating against a paying passenger based on her appearance," Tom Wilson called out from his seat. "We all heard it. We all saw it," Maria Gonzalez added, holding up her phone. "And we recorded it." Jessica looked around the cabin and saw her career ending in real time. Passengers who'd been strangers an hour ago were now unified in their condemnation. Fellow crew members were backing away from her like she had a contagious disease. Her supervisor looked like she was watching a plane crash in slow motion. Agent Martinez Celeste continued, "I'm also requesting immediate notification of Phoenix Airlines corporate headquarters and the Department of Transportation Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. Copy that, Dr. Bryant. All notifications are being processed. The aircraft captain should receive our call within the next 60 seconds. As if summoned by her words, the intercom crackled to life throughout the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've received a priority communication from air traffic control and need to contact our flight operations immediately. Please remain seated while we address an urgent operational matter." Jessica's legs gave out completely. She sank into the nearest empty seat, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with the realization that her world was about to end. The passengers around her watched with a mixture of fascination and satisfaction. Justice was being served at 35,000 feet, swift and merciless, and completely deserved. Carmen Lopez made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Dr. Bryant, on behalf of Phoenix Airlines, I want to formally apologize for this incident. We'll conduct a thorough investigation and take appropriate action." Celeste looked at her with something approaching sympathy. "Carmen, I appreciate that. But investigation and action should have happened long before this. How many other passengers has Jessica treated this way? How many complaints have been filed and ignored? How many people just accepted the abuse because they didn't have the power to fight back? The questions were devastating because everyone knew the answers. This wasn't Jessica's first offense. It was just her first offense against someone who could do something about it. The accountability starts now," Celeste continued, "and it starts at the federal level." In the cockpit, Captain James Rodriguez was about to receive the phone call that would turn his routine flight into a career-defining crisis. The captain had no idea that one of his flight attendants had just triggered a federal civil rights investigation, but he was about to find out. The countdown to consequences had begun. Captain James Rodriguez was reviewing approach charts for Atlanta when his emergency line rang. In 32 years of flying commercial aircraft, he'd learned that calls on that particular phone were never good news. Weather emergencies, mechanical failures, security threats, all the things that could turn a routine flight into a nightmare. But he'd never received a call from the Federal Aviation Administration about civil rights violations happening in real time in his passenger cabin. Phoenix 847. Heavy, this is FAA Emergency Operations. The voice on the radio was crisp, official, immediately commanding attention. We have priority traffic for Captain Rodriguez. Phoenix 847. Heavy, go ahead, Rodriguez replied his co-pilot. First Officer, Patricia Hayes, leaning in to listen. Captain, we've received a discrimination complaint from one of your passengers who has direct reporting authority with our agency. Dr. Celeste Bryant, currently in seat 18C, is alleging civil rights violations by a member of your cabin crew. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. He knew that name. Dr. Celeste Bryant had consulted on 3 separate accident investigations during his career. She was one of the FAA's most respected aerospace medicine experts, someone whose opinions carried weight in Washington, someone whose reports could change industry standards. Can you elaborate on the nature of the complaint? He asked, his voice steady despite the growing alarm in his chest. Passenger denied bathroom access based on alleged discriminatory policies. Flight attendant Jessica Martinez is specifically named. Dr. Bryant is requesting immediate crew intervention and formal documentation of the incident. Rodriguez closed his eyes briefly. Jessica Martinez. He should have known. The woman had been the subject of 3 separate passenger complaint letters in the past year, all of them questioning her customer service standards, all of them quietly filed away by management who didn't want to deal with a problematic employee. Copy, FAA emergency. We'll address this immediately. Captain Rodriguez, please be advised that Dr. Bryant remains on an open line with our Emergency Response Center. This incident is being monitored and recorded in real time. Additional notifications have been sent to Phoenix Airlines corporate headquarters and DOT Consumer Protection. The words hit like physical blows. Real-time monitoring, corporate notifications, DOT involvement. This wasn't just a passenger complaint that could be smoothed over with vouchers and apologies. This was a federal case building in real time. Understood, FAA emergency. Phoenix 847 heavy out. Rodriguez set down his headset and looked at his co-pilot. Patricia Hayes, 41, had been flying with Phoenix Airlines for 15 years. She'd seen passenger disputes, crew problems, and management failures, but nothing that had ever triggered direct FAA intervention during flight. How bad is this? She asked quietly. Career-ending bad, Rodriguez replied. Dr. Bryant isn't just any passenger. She literally writes the rules we follow for aviation medicine. If she's filing a real-time discrimination complaint, someone is about to lose everything. Rodriguez reached for his internal crew phone. Senior flight attendant to the cockpit immediately. In the cabin, Carmen Lopez heard the call and felt her heart skip. Captain calls to the cockpit were never casual. Something significant was happening, and given the situation unfolding around Jessica Martinez, she had a sinking feeling she knew what it was about. I have to go forward, she told Mike Thompson. Whatever happens back here, stay professional and try to keep things calm. Mike nodded, though his face showed the strain of watching a colleague's career self-destruct in public. The junior flight attendant had looked up to Jessica when he started admired her confidence and authority. Now he was seeing the dark side of that authority, the way it could be used to hurt people instead of help them. Carmen made her way to the front of the aircraft, passing passengers who were still buzzing with conversation about the confrontation. Word had spread through the cabin that the black woman in 18C had called the FAA that federal agents were involved, that someone was about to be fired at 35,000 feet. She knocked on the cockpit door and identified herself. The lock disengaged with a heavy click. Carmen Captain Rodriguez's voice was grave. We have a problem. She stepped into the small cockpit space, noting the tension radiating from both pilots. Is this about the passenger dispute in row 18? It's about a federal civil rights investigation, Rodriguez corrected. The passenger, Jessica, denied bathroom access to Dr. Celeste Bryant. She's an FAA consultant with direct reporting authority. Carmen's face went pale. Oh no. Oh yes, she's currently on an open line with FAA Emergency Response filing real-time discrimination charges. Corporate has been notified. The Department of Transportation is involved, and we need to fix this immediately. Carmen sank into the jumpsuit behind the captain's seat. What exactly happened back there? Rodriguez consulted his notes from the FAA call. Dr. Bryant was denied bathroom access by Jessica Martinez. Claims were made about discriminatory airline policies that don't exist. Threats were issued about passenger non-compliance reports, and apparently statements were made that suggested racial bias. Each detail was another nail in Jessica's career coffin. Carmen had supervised the woman for 3 years, had received the complaint. Letters had conducted the counseling sessions that were supposed to address her attitude problems. Nothing had worked. Where's Jessica now? Rodriguez asked, sitting in 21B, having what appears to be a complete nervous breakdown. Carmen replied honestly. Good. She should be nervous. Patricia, get Phoenix operations on the radio. Priority channel. First Officer Hayes began establishing the radio connection while Rodriguez formulated his response strategy. 32 years of command experience had taught him that some situations couldn't be managed or minimized. They could only be handled with complete honesty and immediate accountability. Captain Rodriguez, Phoenix. Operations. The voice crackled through the headset. Phoenix operations. We have a Code 7 passenger complaint involving federal oversight. FAA has been contacted directly by the complainant. We need legal and PR standing by for immediate response upon landing. Code 7 was Phoenix Airlines' internal designation for incidents that could trigger federal investigations. It was rarely used, never taken lightly, and always meant someone's career was in serious jeopardy. Copy. Code 7. Who's the complainant? Dr. Celeste Bryant, FAA consultant. Alleging discrimination by flight attendant Jessica Martinez. The silence on the radio lasted 3 seconds longer than normal. Everyone in Phoenix Airlines management knew Dr. Bryant's reputation. Her reports had led to changes in pilot training, crew scheduling, and safety protocols across the industry. Jesus Christ, came the response, followed immediately by, sorry, Captain, that wasn't meant for transmission. Understood, Phoenix operations. What are your instructions? Captain, you are directed to provide full cooperation with the complainant's requests. Do not attempt to minimize or manage the situation. Document everything. Corporate legal is being activated immediately. Rodriguez looked at Carmen with an expression that mixed sympathy and determination. You heard them. Full cooperation. No damage control. Carmen nodded slowly. What do you want me to do about Jessica? Remove her from passenger contact immediately. Suspend her pending investigation. And start documenting everything that happened. She'll fight it. Union representation grievance procedures. Carmen Rodriguez's voice was quiet but firm. The FAA is monitoring this incident in real time. The passenger she discriminated against literally writes aviation regulations for a living. There is no union protection from federal civil rights violations. The weight of that reality settled over the cockpit like fog. Jessica Martinez hadn't just lost her temper with a difficult passenger. She'd committed a federal offense against one of the most influential people in commercial aviation. Carmen stood to leave her mind already working through the protocols for crew suspension and incident documentation. But Rodriguez's voice stopped her at the door. Carmen, how many times has Jessica done this before? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Both of them knew the answer. The complaint letters, the witness statements, the pattern of behavior that had been ignored because it was easier than dealing with a problematic employee. Too many, Carmen admitted quietly. Then this was inevitable. Rodriguez replied. Dr. Bryant isn't the first passenger Jessica discriminated against. She's just the first one with the power to do something about it. As Carmen left the cockpit to begin the process of ending Jessica Martinez's aviation career, neither she nor the captain had any idea how far the consequences would spread. This wasn't just about one flight attendant's poor judgment. It was about an entire culture of unchecked authority that was about to be exposed at the federal level. In Seat 18C, Dr. Celeste Bryant continued her conversation with FAA Emergency Response, providing detailed documentation that would become the foundation for the most significant discrimination case in Phoenix Airlines history. The revelation was just beginning. Maria Gonzalez had been teaching high school for 12 years, which meant she'd developed an instinct for recognizing important moments. When she pulled out her phone to record the confrontation between Dr. Bryant and Jessica Martinez, she wasn't thinking about viral videos or social media fame. She was thinking about evidence, accountability, and making sure the truth couldn't be buried in corporate bureaucracy. Now, watching the federal investigation unfold in real time, she realized she'd captured something historic. "I got it all," she told her seatmate Tom Wilson, showing him the video on her phone screen. The denial, the fake policies, the threats, everything. Tom leaned over to watch the footage, his software engineer's mind cataloging the technical quality and evidential value. "This is perfect documentation. Clear audio, multiple angles, unedited timeline. Jessica's finished." "Good," Maria said firmly. "What she did was wrong. Dr. Bryant deserves justice." The conversation was overheard by Elena Vasquez, who was translating events for her teenage daughter in rapid Spanish. As a paralegal from Phoenix, Elena understood the legal implications of what they'd witnessed better than most passengers. "Mira, mija," she told her daughter. "This is how you stand up to discrimination. You document it, you report it, you make sure everyone sees what really happened." Her daughter, Sophia, 16, was filming the aftermath on her own phone, capturing the shocked faces of passengers, the nervous energy of the crew, the obvious distress of Jessica Martinez, who was still slumped in seat 21B. "Mom, this is going to be everywhere," Sophia said. "Like everywhere. That flight attendant just became the most hated person on the internet." Elena nodded grimly. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. 3 rows behind them, businessman David Chen was live-streaming the situation to his LinkedIn network. As a diversity and inclusion consultant for Fortune 500 companies, he recognized the incident as a perfect case study in institutional bias and individual accountability. "What you're seeing here, folks," he spoke quietly into his phone camera, "is exactly why we need robust reporting mechanisms and immediate consequences for discriminatory behavior." Dr. Bryant didn't just complain to customer service. She called the Federal Aviation Authority. That's the level of response discrimination should trigger. His live stream was gaining viewers by the minute as connections shared it across professional networks. Comments were pouring in from aviation industry professionals who recognized the names involved and understood the significance of the federal intervention. Dr. James Mitchell, a cardiologist returning from a medical conference, had been watching the situation unfold with professional interest. When he realized Dr. Bryant was a fellow medical professional being discriminated against by airline staff, his anger was swift and focused. "Excuse me," he called out to Carmen Lopez as she returned from the cockpit. "I'm Dr. James Mitchell, cardiothoracic surgery. I want to go on record as a witness to the discrimination I just observed." Carmen paused her notepad already out to document witness statements as ordered by Captain Rodriguez. "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but we're handling this through proper channels." "You mean through the FAA investigation that's already underway?" Dr. Mitchell's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command in high-pressure situations. "Because that's what Dr. Bryant triggered when your flight attendant decided she wasn't worthy of basic human dignity." The exchange was captured by multiple phones, adding to the growing documentary evidence of widespread passenger outrage over Jessica's conduct. Sarah Martinez, no relation to Jessica, a civil rights attorney traveling with her family, had been quietly taking notes throughout the incident. As soon as she understood the legal implications, she'd begun documenting potential violations of federal transportation law. This isn't just discrimination, she announced to the passengers around her. This is a federal civil rights violation under 49 U.S.C. 40127. The Department of Transportation can fine the airline up to $32,000 per incident and require comprehensive remedial action. Her legal expertise gave weight to the growing passenger consensus that Jessica had committed career-ending offenses. The flight attendant wasn't just facing employment consequences, she was potentially facing federal civil rights charges. Tom Wilson opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. As a senior software engineer with a popular tech blog, he was crafting a real-time account of corporate accountability in action. Phoenix Airlines Flight 847 is about to become a case study in how quickly justice can be served when the victim has the right connections, he wrote. Dr. Celeste Bryant didn't just file a complaint. She triggered a federal investigation at 35,000 feet. This is what accountability looks like. His blog post would be published before the plane landed, reaching 50,000 readers within the first hour and establishing the narrative framework for media coverage of the incident. Maria Gonzalez was also active on social media, posting clips from her video to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, with captions that identified the key players and explained the federal implications. "This is Dr. Celeste Bryant," she wrote. She's an FAA consultant who was denied bathroom access by flight attendant Jessica Martinez on Phoenix Airlines Flight 847. Dr. Bryant called the FAA during the flight. Federal agents are now involved. This is how you handle discrimination. You don't accept it. You document it, and you report it to the highest authorities available. The post was shared 500 times within the first 10 minutes, beginning the social media avalanche that would make Jessica Martinez infamous and Dr. Bryant a symbol of effective resistance to institutional bias. Elena Vasquez was coordinating with the Spanish-language media through her contacts at Univision. The story of a black professional being discriminated against by airline staff only to trigger immediate federal accountability was exactly the kind of story that resonated with Latino audiences who'd experienced similar treatment. "This woman is a hero," Elena told the reporter on her phone. "She didn't just stand up for herself. She stood up for everyone who's ever been treated like they don't belong. And she had the power to do something about it immediately." The conversation was being translated in real time by Sophia, creating bilingual documentation of the passenger response and ensuring the story would reach multiple community networks. Dr. Mitchell was coordinating with medical colleagues through a group chat that included several aviation medicine specialists. When they realized one of their own was involved, the medical community's response was swift and unified. Dr. Bryant is one of the most respected professionals in aerospace medicine, he posted to the group. What happened to her today represents discrimination against the medical community as a whole. We need to support her and make sure there are serious consequences. The medical professionals began sharing the story through their networks, adding professional credibility to the discrimination claims and ensuring the incident would receive attention in medical journals and industry publications. Carmen Lopez moved through the cabin collecting witness statements as instructed by Captain Rodriguez. Every passenger she spoke to confirmed the same basic facts. Jessica had denied bathroom access based on fabricated policies, made statements suggesting racial bias, and threatened false reports against Dr. Bryant. "This is the most clear-cut case of discrimination I've ever witnessed," Tom Wilson told Carmen when she reached his seat. "Jessica destroyed her own career with her own words. Every passenger here can testify to that." Carmen nodded grimly, adding his statement to her growing documentation file. The weight of evidence against Jessica was overwhelming, undeniable, and completely damning. But the passengers weren't finished. They were organizing, sharing contact information, coordinating their testimony, and ensuring that Jessica Martinez would face maximum accountability for her actions. Justice was being crowdsourced at 35,000 feet, and there was nothing Phoenix Airlines could do to stop it. In Phoenix Airlines corporate headquarters, Sandra Martinez was in the middle of a budget review meeting when her emergency phone rang. As vice president of operations, she'd received crisis calls before. Weather emergencies, mechanical failures, security incidents. But the tone in her assistant's voice when she answered told her this was different. "Sandra, we have a federal situation developing on Flight 847. The words sent a chill through her. Federal situation was corporate code for the kind of incident that made national news, triggered regulatory investigations, and ended executive careers. Details, she said, curtly stepping out of the conference room into her private office. Discrimination complaint filed directly with the FAA by Dr. Celeste Bryant. She's on Flight 847 Phoenix to Atlanta. The complainant is an FAA consultant with direct reporting authority. She's alleging civil rights violations by flight attendant Jessica Martinez. Sandra's blood pressure spiked immediately. She knew both names. Dr. Bryant was one of the most respected figures in aviation medicine, someone whose opinions carried weight with federal regulators. Jessica Martinez was a problem employee who should have been terminated years ago, but kept getting second chances because of union protection and management inaction. Is the FAA involved? Sandra asked, though she already knew the answer. Real-time investigation. Emergency Response Center is monitoring an open line with Dr. Bryant. Captain Rodriguez has been instructed to provide full cooperation. Department of Transportation has been notified. Sandra sank into her chair as the full implications hit her. This wasn't a complaint that could be handled with customer service vouchers and private settlements. This was a federal civil rights case being built in real time with multiple witnesses and government oversight. Get me legal PR and the CEO immediately. Conference Room A. Emergency Protocols. Within 10 minutes, Sandra was sitting across from Phoenix Airlines' most senior executives as they struggled to understand how a routine passenger complaint had escalated to federal intervention before the aircraft had even landed. Chief Executive Officer Robert Chen, 58, looked like a man watching his worst nightmare unfold. Explain to me how we have a federal civil rights investigation happening at 35,000 feet. General Counsel Patricia Williams, 52, was reviewing her notes from the emergency briefing. Dr. Celeste Bryant is an FAA consultant specializing in aerospace medicine. She has direct reporting authority with multiple federal agencies. When she files a discrimination complaint, it carries the weight of federal employee protection statutes. What exactly did Jessica Martinez do? Chen demanded. Sandra consulted her incident report. Denied bathroom access to Dr. Bryant based on alleged airline policies that don't exist. Made statements suggesting the policies were based on passenger type. Threatened to file false reports about passenger non-compliance when challenged. The silence in the room was deafening. Every executive understood they were looking at career-ending liability. Chief Financial Officer Michael Torres, 49, was already calculating damage scenarios. What's our exposure? Unlimited. Williams replied bluntly. Federal civil rights violations can trigger punitive damages in the tens of millions, plus regulatory sanctions, operating certificate review, and congressional oversight. Chen rubbed his temples, feeling a stress headache building. How did we get here? How did Jessica Martinez still have a job? Sandra opened the employment file she'd requested during the emergency briefing. 3 passenger complaint letters in the past year. All alleging discriminatory treatment, 2 formal counseling sessions, 1 written warning. No termination because union procedures require progressive discipline. Progressive discipline for discrimination. Williams' voice was incredulous. Who authorized that approach? The question hung in the air as everyone realized the failures that had led to this moment. Management had known about Jessica's problematic behavior, had documented, it had received multiple warnings, and had chosen bureaucratic convenience over passenger protection. This is a corporate culture failure, Chen said quietly. We prioritized employee protection over customer dignity, and now we're facing federal accountability. Public Relations Director Lisa Rodriguez, 45, was monitoring social media feeds on her tablet. "It's already viral," she announced. "Passenger videos are being shared across multiple platforms. Flight 847, justice is trending. We're going to be the face of airline discrimination by tomorrow morning." Sandra pulled up the passenger manifest on her laptop. "Who else is on that flight? Any other potential complications?" 2 doctors, 1 civil rights attorney, 1 diversity consultant, and multiple passengers with significant social media followings," Lisa replied. "Essentially, we discriminated against an FAA consultant in front of the worst possible audience." Chen stood and began pacing the room. "Forget damage control. Forget minimizing exposure. We need to accept responsibility, implement immediate reforms, and pray the federal government doesn't revoke our operating certificate." Williams was drafting legal strategy on her notepad. "We need to terminate Jessica Martinez immediately. Full investigation of management oversight failures, comprehensive review of discrimination policies, and significant financial settlement with Dr. Bryant." "How significant?" Torres asked. "Whatever it takes to avoid federal prosecution," Williams replied. "Dr. Bryant has the authority to turn this into a Department of Justice civil rights case. We cannot let that happen." Sandra's phone rang with an update from the aircraft. She answered on speaker. "Ma'am, this is Captain Rodriguez. The situation has stabilized, but passenger sentiment is completely against the airline. Multiple witnesses are coordinating testimony. The FAA complainant remains on an open line with federal authorities." "Captain, what's your assessment?" Chen asked. "Complete institutional failure, sir. This isn't about one employee making a mistake. This is about a culture that allowed discrimination to continue unchecked. Dr. Bryant isn't just filing a complaint. She's documenting a pattern of bias." The words hit the executive team like physical blows. This wasn't crisis management anymore. This was corporate survival. Chen made the decision that would define Phoenix Airlines' response to the crisis. Full accountability, immediate termination of Jessica Martinez, complete cooperation with federal investigation, public acceptance of responsibility, and whatever resources Dr. Bryant needs to reform our policies. Sir Torres interjected the financial exposure. "Is less important than our reputation and operating authority?" Chen cut him off. "We're going to fix this publicly and completely, because if we don't, there won't be an airline left to worry about." As the executive team began implementing crisis response protocols, none of them realized how deeply the investigation would dig into Phoenix Airlines' corporate practices. Dr. Bryant's complaint wasn't just about bathroom access. It was about to expose years of management failures, cultural problems, and institutional bias that reached into every level of the organization. The emergency response was just the beginning. While Phoenix Airlines executives scrambled to contain the federal crisis, Human Resources Director Angela Foster was pulling Jessica Martinez's complete employment file. What she found was a damning pattern of discriminatory behavior that should have resulted in termination years earlier. The first complaint arrived in Jessica's second year with the airline. A black businessman from Chicago alleged that she'd questioned his right to sit in an upgraded seat, demanded additional documentation, and made comments about passengers who looked like they belonged in premium cabins. The complaint was filed away as a misunderstanding after Jessica claimed it was a seating mix-up. The second incident occurred 8 months later. A Latino family traveling with elderly grandparents reported that Jessica had been dismissive and hostile when they requested assistance with carry-on luggage. She'd allegedly told them that people should come prepared to handle their own bags and suggested they fly airlines that cater to their needs. The third complaint was from an Asian American doctor who claimed Jessica had questioned her medical credentials when she offered to assist with a passenger medical emergency. Jessica had reportedly said she needed to see real identification before allowing someone like that to provide medical care. Each complaint had been investigated by Jessica's supervisor, Daniel White, 45, a manager who'd been with Phoenix Airlines for 22 years. In each case, White had accepted Jessica's denials, characterized the incidents as communication misunderstandings, and recommended additional customer service training rather than disciplinary action. Angela Foster read through the files with growing horror and professional outrage. The pattern was clear documented and should have triggered termination procedures years ago. Instead, it had been covered up by a manager who apparently shared Jessica's biases. She reached for her secure phone line to brief CEO Robert Chen on the full scope of the problem. "Sir, we have a much bigger issue than one discriminatory flight attendant," she began. "Jessica Martinez has a documented history of targeting minority passengers. 3 formal complaints in 5 years, all with the same pattern of behavior." "How did she keep her job?" Chen demanded. Supervisor Daniel White classified all complaints as training issues rather than disciplinary matters. He appears to have actively protected her from consequences. Chen closed his eyes, realizing the federal investigation would uncover not just individual discrimination, but organizational complicity. "Where's White now, currently working as operations supervisor for the Western region? He's overseen crew assignments and passenger service training for the past 3 years. The implications were staggering. If White had been protecting Jessica while supervising other employees, the discriminatory culture could have spread throughout the organization. "Get me his employment file immediately," Chen ordered, "and start pulling records on every employee he supervised." Meanwhile, Carmen Lopez was in the aircraft lavatory reviewing her own documentation of Jessica's behavior. As senior flight attendant, she'd been required to sign off on Jessica's performance evaluations and training certifications. Looking back, she realized she'd been complicit in enabling the discrimination through administrative rubber stamping. Jessica had always been difficult to work with, prone to making harsh judgments about passengers based on appearance rather than behavior. Carmen had attributed it to personality quirks rather than recognizing it as discriminatory bias. She'd written performance reviews that focused on Jessica's technical competence while glossing over passenger complaint patterns. The federal investigation would examine every document, every evaluation, every decision that had allowed Jessica to continue targeting minority passengers. Carmen realized her own career was now in jeopardy. Dr. O. Celeste Bryant, still on the phone with FAA Emergency Response, was providing detailed context about her professional background that was making federal investigators realize the magnitude of Phoenix Airlines' error. "Agent Martinez," she said to her FAA contact, "I need to clarify something important. I'm not just filing this complaint as a passenger. I'm filing it as a federal aviation safety consultant who has observed behavior that suggests widespread cultural problems within this airline. Can you elaborate on that assessment, Dr. Bryant?" The confidence with which flight attendant Martinez invented discriminatory policies suggests she's done this before. The lack of immediate correction by supervisory staff suggests management tolerance for such behavior. This appears to be institutional rather than individual misconduct. Agent Martinez was taking notes rapidly. "Are you formally recommending a comprehensive investigation of Phoenix Airlines' employment practices?" "I am. This level of brazen discrimination doesn't develop in isolation. There's a culture that supports and enables this behavior." The federal response was immediate and expansive. Within an hour, the Department of Transportation had authorized a full audit of Phoenix Airlines' employment practices, training procedures, and passenger complaint resolution processes. Justice Department Civil Rights Division was notified about potential pattern and practice violations. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was briefed on possible workplace discrimination issues. The investigation that began with Jessica Martinez denying bathroom access was expanding into a comprehensive review of corporate culture and management accountability. Back in Phoenix headquarters, Angela Foster was discovering the true scope of Daniel White's protective relationship with problematic employees. His region had the highest rate of passenger discrimination complaints in the entire airline, but also the lowest rate of employee disciplinary action. He's been running interference for employees who target minority passengers, she told Chen during an emergency conference call. Not just Jessica Martinez. At least 6 other flight attendants in his region have similar complaint patterns with no consequences. Chen realized Phoenix Airlines was facing not just a single discrimination case, but potential class action lawsuits from hundreds of passengers who'd been mistreated by employees whose behavior had been enabled by management. "How deep does this go?" he asked. "We won't know until the federal investigation is complete," Foster replied. "But it appears we have a regional culture of discrimination that's been protected and enabled by supervision." The revelation that Jessica Martinez was part of a larger pattern of discriminatory behavior ensured that her termination would be just the beginning of corporate accountability measures. Phoenix Airlines was about to undergo the most comprehensive federal investigation in its history, and it all started with one woman who refused to accept being denied basic human dignity. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom with unusual gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Due to a serious policy violation, we are making immediate changes to our cabin crew assignments. We apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your patience as we address this matter." The announcement was carefully worded, but every passenger understood its meaning. Jessica Martinez was being removed from duty in real time, her career ending at 35,000 feet in front of hundreds of witnesses. Carmen Lopez approached Jessica's seat with a mixture of professional duty and personal sadness. Despite her problematic behavior, Jessica had been a colleague for 8 years. But federal civil rights violations left no room for sentiment or second chances. Jessica Carmen said quietly, "You need to come with me." Jessica looked up from her seat, her face tear-streaked and hollow with shock. "Are they really firing me? Phoenix Airlines policy requires immediate suspension for any employee facing federal civil rights complaints." Carmen replied, following the script provided by corporate legal. "You'll be escorted from the aircraft upon landing and removed from all flight duties pending investigation." "But I didn't mean—" Jessica began, then stopped. She knew it was too late for explanations or apologies. Dr. Bryant's phone call to the FAA had triggered a chain of accountability that couldn't be stopped or reversed. Maria Gonzalez continued recording from her seat, capturing Jessica's final moments as an airline employee. The woman who'd wielded authority so confidently an hour earlier now looked broken, defeated, completely stripped of the power she'd abused. "This is what accountability looks like," Maria whispered to her phone camera. "Actions have consequences, especially when you discriminate against someone with federal authority." Tom Wilson was live-streaming the crew change to his professional network, providing commentary on corporate crisis management and individual responsibility. "What you're witnessing," he told his online audience, "is how quickly careers can end when discrimination meets federal oversight." Jessica Martinez didn't just lose her temper with a passenger. She committed a civil rights violation against an FAA consultant. There's no union protection from that level of misconduct. Elena Vasquez translated the events for her daughter while privately marveling at the speed of justice. In her experience with workplace discrimination cases, accountability usually took months or years to achieve. Dr. Bryant had triggered immediate consequences through her federal connections and professional authority. Carmen was following corporate instructions to document every aspect of Jessica's removal from duty. The federal investigation would require detailed records of how Phoenix Airlines responded to the discrimination complaint, and any appearance of protecting Jessica would result in additional corporate liability. "I need your employee badge access cards and any airline property in your possession," Carmen said, her voice professionally neutral despite the personal discomfort of the situation. Jessica fumbled through her purse and uniform pockets, collecting the symbols of her aviation career with shaking hands. Her badge, which had granted her authority over passengers for 8 years, was now evidence in a federal civil rights case. Mike Thompson watched the termination process with fascination and horror. As the most junior crew member, he'd looked up to Jessica's confidence and authority. Now he realized he'd been admiring someone who'd built her professional identity around discriminating against passengers she considered unworthy of respect. Dr. Bryant remained on her phone with FAA emergency response, providing real-time documentation of Phoenix Airlines crisis response procedures. Her professional assessment would become part of the federal investigation into corporate culture and management accountability. Agent Martinez Phoenix Airlines is implementing immediate disciplinary action against the flight attendant in question. Badge confiscation and duty suspension are currently in progress. Copy that, Dr. Bryant. We're documenting all corporate responses for inclusion in our investigation file. Please continue providing updates on any additional airline actions. The federal monitoring was ensuring that Phoenix Airlines couldn't minimize or cover up the incident. Every decision, every conversation, every consequence was being recorded for potential use in civil rights enforcement actions. Carmen completed the badge confiscation process and led Jessica toward the front of the aircraft, away from passenger contact. The walk down the aisle was a public humiliation that would be replayed on social media for years to come. "Thank you," called out Dr. Mitchell as Jessica passed his seat. "This is exactly what should happen to people who discriminate against others." Several passengers applauded quietly, not celebrating Jessica's destruction, but acknowledging the importance of immediate accountability for discriminatory behavior. Jessica kept her eyes down, unable to face the passengers who'd witnessed her abuse of authority and were now watching her consequences unfold. The woman who'd felt so powerful an hour earlier was now completely powerless, her career ended by her own choices and words. At Phoenix Airlines headquarters, CEO Robert Chen was coordinating simultaneous termination procedures for Jessica Martinez and her supervisor Daniel White. The federal investigation had revealed that White's protection of discriminatory employees violated multiple corporate policies and federal employment laws. Both terminations are effective immediately, Chen announced to his executive team. No severance, no positive references, no consideration for rehire. We're treating this as gross misconduct with federal implications. Human Resources Director Angela Foster was already preparing documentation for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The terminations would be presented as evidence of Phoenix Airlines' commitment to ending discriminatory practices and holding employees accountable. How many other employees in White's region need to be reviewed? General Counsel Patricia Williams asked. At least 24 flight attendants and supervisors, Foster replied, all with complaint patterns that suggest discriminatory behavior enabled by management protection. Chen realized the federal investigation would require comprehensive personnel reviews and potential additional terminations. The culture of discrimination that had protected Jessica Martinez was larger than one employee or one supervisor. Back on the aircraft, Carmen was documenting the crew change for corporate legal review. Every procedural step had to be perfect to withstand federal scrutiny and demonstrate Phoenix Airlines' commitment to civil rights compliance. The situation has been addressed according to federal requirements, she reported to Captain Rodriguez via internal communication. Problem employee has been removed from passenger contact and will be terminated upon landing. Copy that, Rodriguez replied. Corporate has confirmed that termination paperwork is already being processed. This employee will never work for Phoenix Airlines again. The speed and finality of the consequences sent a clear message to remaining crew members about the zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. Jessica Martinez had become an example of what happened when employee bias met federal accountability. As the aircraft continued toward Atlanta, passengers shared videos and photos of the termination process across social media platforms. Jessica Martinez fired began trending alongside Flight 847, Justice creating a permanent digital record of discrimination consequences. Jessica's aviation career was over, but the broader investigation into Phoenix Airlines' corporate culture was just beginning. The federal authorities weren't satisfied with individual termination. They wanted comprehensive reform to prevent future discrimination. The immediate consequences were complete and devastating, but the lasting changes would reach far beyond one flight attendant's destroyed career. Within 4 hours of Dr. Bryant's initial phone call, the discrimination incident aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847 had triggered the most comprehensive federal investigation in the company's 43-year history. The Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission were all actively involved in reviewing potential violations. FAA Inspector Michael Rodriguez, 50, was appointed as lead federal investigator for the incident. His first action was to request all employment records for Jessica Martinez, Daniel White, and every supervisor in Phoenix Airlines' Western region dating back 5 years. What we're seeing Rodriguez explain to his investigation team is not an isolated incident of employee misconduct, but evidence of institutional discrimination that's been enabled and protected by management. The federal investigators had already identified over 30 passenger complaints involving Jessica Martinez and employees under Daniel White's supervision. The pattern was unmistakable. Minority passengers were targeted for hostile treatment, additional scrutiny, and dignity violations. At the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, Attorney Sarah Kim was reviewing the case for potential criminal charges under federal civil rights statutes. The fact that Dr. Bryant was an FAA consultant with direct federal authority elevated the incident beyond simple employment discrimination. This could qualify as a federal hate crime under 18 U.S.C. 249, Kim told her supervisor. When airline employees deny services based on racial bias, they're violating federal transportation laws and civil rights protections. The legal implications were staggering. Phoenix Airlines faced potential criminal prosecution, civil rights lawsuits, regulatory sanctions, and congressional oversight. The company's operating certificate was under review, which could result in suspension of all flight operations. Robert Torres, Dr. Bryant's husband and a seasoned corporate attorney, was coordinating legal strategy with some of the country's most prominent civil rights lawyers. The incident had attracted attention from organizations across the legal spectrum. "We're not just seeking individual justice for Celeste Torres," explained to the legal team assembling for the case. "We're pursuing comprehensive industry reform to ensure this never happens to another passenger." The legal strategy was multifaceted. Individual discrimination lawsuit against Phoenix Airlines, pattern and practice complaint with federal agencies, class action certification to represent other affected passengers, and legislative advocacy for stronger federal protections. Meanwhile, Phoenix Airlines' legal exposure was expanding exponentially as federal investigators uncovered the scope of discriminatory practices within the organization. General Counsel Patricia Williams was calculating potential damages in the hundreds of millions. "We're facing civil rights violations under multiple federal statutes," she briefed CEO Robert Chen. Section 1981 Discrimination Claims, Americans with Disabilities Act, Violations, Civil Rights Act, Enforcement Actions, and potential criminal prosecution under federal hate crime laws. Chen realized the company was fighting for its survival. Federal authorities had the power to revoke Phoenix Airlines' operating certificate, effectively shutting down the business that employed over 15,000 people. "What's our best-case scenario?" he asked. "Complete cooperation with federal investigation, comprehensive settlement with all affected passengers, total reform of employment practices, and federal monitoring of our operations for 5 years," Williams replied. "And worst case, criminal prosecution of executives, revocation of operating authority bankruptcy, and dissolution of the company. The stakes couldn't be higher." At the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, investigators were reviewing Phoenix Airlines' hiring practices, training procedures, and complaint resolution policies. The agency was particularly interested in how discrimination complaints had been buried by management. "We've identified at least 47 discrimination complaints involving Phoenix Airlines employees over the past 3 years," EEOC investigator Janet Torres reported to her supervisors. Less than 10% resulted in any disciplinary action. That suggests a company culture that tolerates and enables discrimination. The EEOC was preparing to file its own federal lawsuit against Phoenix Airlines for creating a hostile environment that violated civil rights laws. The agency's involvement meant the case would receive national media attention and congressional scrutiny. Dr. Bryant was also consulting with aviation industry lawyers about the broader implications of her incident. As one of the most respected figures in aerospace medicine, her experience would influence federal policy for years to come. "This isn't just about what happened to me," she told her legal team. "This is about establishing precedent for immediate federal intervention when civil rights violations occur in commercial aviation." The legal precedent being established was revolutionary. Previous discrimination cases had taken months or years to reach federal attention. Dr. Bryant's real-time reporting to FAA authorities had triggered immediate investigation and accountability. Federal prosecutors were particularly interested in the pattern of behavior that allowed Jessica Martinez to continue discriminating against passengers despite multiple complaints. The protection provided by Supervisor Daniel White could constitute conspiracy to violate civil rights under federal law. When management actively conceals discrimination complaints and protects biased employees, they become co-conspirators in civil rights violations, explained federal prosecutor David Chen. This could result in criminal charges against multiple Phoenix Airlines executives. The company's board of directors was meeting an emergency session to consider CEO Robert Chen's future. Several board members were calling for his immediate resignation to demonstrate corporate accountability and potentially reduce federal sanctions. "The federal investigation is examining our leadership's knowledge of discriminatory practices," board chair Patricia Martinez warned. "If executives knew about the problems and failed to address them, they could face personal criminal liability." Phoenix Airlines' stock price had fallen 37% since news of the federal investigation became public. Investors were fleeing a company that faced potential shutdown by federal authorities. The legal ramifications extended beyond Phoenix Airlines to the entire aviation industry. Federal regulators were reviewing policies across all commercial carriers to determine if discriminatory practices were widespread. Dr. Bryant's case has opened the door to comprehensive industry review, FAA Administrator Lisa Rodriguez announced at a congressional hearing. "We're examining whether this incident represents isolated misconduct or a broader pattern of civil rights violations in commercial aviation." Congress was also taking notice. The House Transportation Committee announced hearings on airline discrimination practices with Dr. Bryant scheduled as the lead witness. "What happened to Dr. Bryant aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847 is unacceptable," Committee Chair Maria Gonzalez declared. "Congress will ensure there are comprehensive reforms to protect all passengers from discriminatory treatment." The federal response was unprecedented in its scope and speed. Within 48 hours, a single bathroom denial had triggered criminal investigation, civil rights enforcement, congressional oversight, and industry-wide policy review. Jessica Martinez had thought she was exercising legitimate authority over a difficult passenger. Instead, she had triggered the largest federal civil rights investigation in aviation history. The legal consequences were just beginning. 6 weeks after Dr. Bryant's phone call to the FAA triggered a federal investigation, Phoenix Airlines was implementing the most comprehensive civil rights reform program in commercial aviation history. The changes weren't voluntary. They were mandated by a federal consent decree that would govern the airline's operations for the next 5 years. Chief Diversity Officer Dr. Monica Williams, 48, had been hired away from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division specifically to oversee Phoenix Airlines' transformation. Her first day included a sobering briefing on the scope of discriminatory practices the federal investigation had uncovered. "What we're dealing with," she told CEO Robert Chen during her initial assessment, "is not isolated incidents, but a corporate culture that devalued the dignity of minority passengers and employees." The federal investigation had identified discrimination patterns across multiple Phoenix Airlines hubs involving over 200 employees and affecting thousands of passengers over a 5-year period. The consent decree required comprehensive changes to hiring, training, supervision, and accountability procedures. Dr. Williams' first major initiative was implementing mandatory bias training for all 15,000 Phoenix Airlines employees. But this wasn't generic diversity education. It was intensive, personalized instruction developed specifically around the Jessica Martinez incident and similar cases. Every employee will complete 40 hours of civil rights education, she announced at the company-wide meeting introducing reform measures. We're not checking boxes. We're changing hearts and minds. The training program featured case studies, role-playing exercises, and direct testimony from passengers who'd experienced discrimination. Dr. Bryant herself participated in the executive sessions describing her experience and the federal response it triggered. When Jessica Martinez denied my bathroom access, Dr. Bryant told the assembled executives she didn't just violate my dignity. She revealed a culture that taught employees they could treat passengers differently based on race appearance and perceived status. The impact on Phoenix Airlines executives was profound. Several broke down in tears listening to Dr. Bryant's measured professional description of her humiliation and the nature of the discrimination she'd experienced. Phoenix Airlines also implemented real-time discrimination reporting that connected directly to federal monitoring authorities. Any passenger could file complaints immediately through mobile apps, website portals, or direct phone lines staffed 24/7 by civil rights specialists. Zero tolerance means zero delay, Dr. Williams explained to the media during the reform announcement. Discriminatory behavior will be addressed immediately with federal authorities notified within 1 hour of any credible complaint. The transparency requirements were unprecedented. Phoenix Airlines was required to publish monthly reports detailing discrimination complaints, investigation outcomes, and disciplinary actions. Federal monitors had unrestricted access to employment records, training materials, and passenger feedback data. Captain James Rodriguez was promoted to Director of Flight Operations Integrity, responsible for ensuring that discriminatory behavior by crew members was identified and addressed immediately. His first action was implementing cockpit protocols for federal reporting of civil rights violations. Every flight deck crew will be trained on federal discrimination reporting procedures, he announced to the Pilot Association. We're not just responsible for flight safety anymore. We're responsible for passenger dignity and civil rights compliance. The financial costs of reform were staggering. Phoenix Airlines committed $89 million over 5 years to civil rights training, monitoring, victim compensation, and cultural transformation initiatives. But the alternative was potential loss of operating authority and company dissolution. Dr. Bryant was hired as senior consultant for civil rights compliance, giving her direct authority to review policies, investigate complaints, and recommend additional reforms. Her appointment sent a clear message about Phoenix Airlines' commitment to change. Dr. Bryant's involvement ensures that our reforms are meaningful rather than cosmetic, CEO Chen explained to shareholders during a quarterly meeting. Her expertise and authority guarantee that we're building sustainable change rather than temporary compliance. The reform program also included comprehensive review of promotional practices, performance evaluations, and disciplinary procedures. The federal investigation had revealed that discriminatory employees like Jessica Martinez had been protected through biased supervision and inadequate accountability measures. We're rebuilding our entire human resources infrastructure, Dr. Williams told the employee town hall meeting. Merit respect and civil rights compliance will determine career advancement. Discrimination will end careers immediately. New hiring practices emphasized civil rights compliance and cultural sensitivity. All supervisory positions required federal background checks and civil rights training certification. Employees with discrimination complaints in their records were removed from passenger contact roles. The changes extended to vendors, contractors, and business partners. Phoenix Airlines required civil rights compliance certification from all service providers, ensuring that discriminatory practices couldn't be outsourced or hidden within contracted operations. Reform means total transformation, Dr. Williams emphasized. We're not fixing isolated problems. We're rebuilding corporate culture from the foundation up. Federal monitors praised Phoenix Airlines' reform implementation while maintaining strict oversight of progress. The consent decree included specific benchmarks for discrimination reduction, employee compliance, and passenger satisfaction with civil rights protections. Phoenix Airlines is demonstrating that meaningful change is possible when leadership commits to comprehensive reform rather than minimal compliance, said federal monitor Judge Patricia Torres. They're becoming a model for industry-wide transformation. The reforms attracted attention from other airlines, seeking to avoid federal investigation and regulatory sanctions. Phoenix Airlines began licensing its civil rights training programs and policy frameworks to competitors, creating additional revenue while spreading reform throughout the industry. Dr. Bryant's role in designing and implementing the reforms gave her unprecedented influence over commercial aviation civil rights policies. Her experience aboard Flight 847 had evolved from personal discrimination to industry transformation. What began as a denial of basic human dignity has become a catalyst for comprehensive change, she reflected during a congressional hearing on aviation civil rights. Federal accountability, immediate consequences, and sustained reform can eliminate discrimination from commercial aviation. The Phoenix Airlines reforms were becoming the new standard for civil rights compliance in the transportation industry. Federal agencies were using the consent decree as a template for regulatory enforcement across multiple sectors. Change was happening not just at Phoenix Airlines but throughout commercial aviation, triggered by one woman's refusal to accept discriminatory treatment and her ability to demand immediate federal accountability. The transformation was comprehensive, sustainable, and irreversible. Jessica Martinez sat in her childhood bedroom in rural Ohio, staring at the rejection letter from yet another potential employer. 6 months after her termination from Phoenix Airlines, she had applied for over 200 jobs and received exactly 0 offers. Her name had become synonymous with workplace discrimination, her face recognized from viral videos that had been viewed millions of times worldwide. The small town of Millfield, population 3847, had initially welcomed home their former flight attendant with curiosity and sympathy. Jessica had grown up here, been homecoming queen at Millfield High, married her high school sweetheart in the local Methodist church. People remembered her as ambitious, confident, determined to see the world beyond Ohio's cornfields. But social media had found Millfield. The videos of Jessica's discrimination against Dr. Bryant, her public termination, and the federal investigation had reached even this isolated community. Former classmates who'd once admired her aviation career now crossed the street to avoid conversation. "I can't even go to the grocery store without people staring," she told her mother, Carol Martinez, during one of their increasingly frequent arguments about Jessica's future. Carol, 67, had watched her daughter's life implode with helplessness and growing frustration. The confident young woman who'd left for aviation training 15 years earlier had returned as a broken, bitter person who blamed everyone except herself for her circumstances. Maybe if you apologized publicly, Carol suggested, for the 100th time, people might give you a second chance. Apologize for what? Jessica snapped. For doing my job. For maintaining order on an aircraft. That woman set me up, used her connections to destroy my career. The complete lack of accountability was the most troubling aspect of Jessica's downfall for those who knew her best. Even facing complete social and professional ruin, she couldn't acknowledge that her discriminatory behavior had been wrong. Jessica's husband, Michael, had filed for divorce 3 months after the incident. He'd watched the viral videos like everyone else, heard his wife's dismissive comments about passenger types, seen her fabricate policies to deny basic dignity to a fellow human being. "I don't know who you became," he'd told her during their final conversation. "The woman I married would never have treated someone like that." The divorce proceedings had been swift and final. Michael kept their house in Phoenix, their shared savings, and custody of their 2 cats. Jessica was left with legal bills, social media infamy, and a completely destroyed reputation. Employment prospects in aviation were permanently closed. The Federal Aviation Administration had flagged Jessica's termination for discrimination in all industry databases. No commercial airline charter service or aviation company would consider hiring someone with federal civil rights violations on their record. But the employment blackout extended far beyond aviation. Retail managers, restaurant owners, and service industry employers all declined to hire Jessica once they recognized her name or face from the viral videos. Being the face of workplace discrimination made her unemployable in any customer-facing role. "Have you considered changing your name?" suggested the employment counselor at the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services during Jessica's monthly required meeting. "I shouldn't have to change my name," Jessica replied bitterly. "I shouldn't have to hide because one passenger decided to destroy my life." The counselor, Maria Gonzalez, coincidentally sharing a name with one of the passengers who'd recorded Jessica's behavior, had dealt with difficult cases before, but never someone whose misconduct had been documented so thoroughly and shared so widely. "Jessica, you have to understand that what happened on that flight wasn't a misunderstanding or a communication problem. You discriminated against a passenger based on her race and then compounded the violation with threats and false policies. That's not something employers can overlook." Jessica's financial situation was becoming desperate. Her unemployment benefits had been challenged by Phoenix Airlines, who argued that termination for federal civil rights violations disqualified her from benefits. The appeal process was ongoing, but meantime she had no income and mounting debt. Her parents, both retired on fixed Social Security incomes, couldn't support her indefinitely. The house she'd grown up in was being strained by an adult daughter who contributed nothing financially while consuming food utilities and emotional energy. "You need to find something," her father, Robert Martinez, told her during a family meeting. "Anything. Stock shelves, clean offices, deliver newspapers. But you can't just sit here feeling sorry for yourself." Jessica finally accepted part-time work at a convenience store on the edge of town, working overnight shifts when customer traffic was minimal. The job paid $8.50 per hour, less than 1/10 of her former aviation salary, and required her to wear a uniform name tag that frequently prompted recognition and comments from customers. "Hey, aren't you that racist flight attendant from the videos?" was a question she heard several times per week. The constant recognition and judgment took a psychological toll that isolated Jessica even further from potential recovery. She couldn't rebuild her life when every interaction reminded her of her fall from professional grace. Social media continued to haunt her despite deleting all her personal accounts. New videos occasionally surfaced featuring commentary on her case, updates on Dr. Bryant's reform work, or discussions of workplace accountability. Jessica's name and face remained permanently associated with discrimination and federal civil rights violations. Dating became impossible. Online profiles were quickly identified and connected to the viral videos. Potential romantic partners inevitably learned about her past and discontinued contact. The social isolation was complete and seemingly permanent. "I lost everything," she told her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her childhood home. "My career, my husband, my reputation, my future. All because one woman couldn't wait to use the bathroom." The complete inability to accept responsibility for her actions ensured that Jessica would never recover from the consequences of her behavior. Without acknowledgement of wrongdoing, there could be no genuine apology, no path to redemption, no possibility of rebuilding trust with society. Jessica Martinez had become a cautionary tale about the permanent consequences of discriminatory behavior in the digital age. Her story served as a warning to other employees about the career-ending risks of treating customers differently based on race appearance or perceived status. The woman who'd once felt powerful enough to deny basic human dignity to a fellow human being was now powerless to rebuild her own dignity. The karma was complete, devastating, and entirely self-inflicted. Dr. Celeste Bryant stood before the International Aviation Safety Conference in Geneva, Switzerland, addressing an audience of 200 to 500 airline executives, federal regulators, and safety professionals from 63 countries. 18 months after her bathroom denial aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847, she had become the most influential voice in commercial aviation civil rights reform. What happened to me at 35,000 feet wasn't an isolated incident, she told the assembled aviation leaders. It was a symptom of institutional bias that exists throughout our industry, and it's something we can eliminate through immediate accountability, comprehensive training, and zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. The speech received a standing ovation from industry professionals who had witnessed the transformation of commercial aviation civil rights policies following Dr. Bryant's federal intervention. Her consulting firm, Bryant Aviation Equity Solutions, had become the most sought-after civil rights compliance company in the transportation sector. Within 12 months of the Phoenix Airlines incident, Dr. Bryant's consulting practice had generated over $12 million in revenue from airlines seeking to implement comprehensive discrimination prevention programs. Her approach wasn't theoretical. It was based on lived experience, federal authority, and proven results. We don't just train employees to avoid discrimination, she explained to potential clients during corporate presentations. We rebuild organizational culture to actively promote dignity, respect, and equal treatment for all passengers and employees. The Bryant Protocol, as her comprehensive reform framework had become known, was now required at 14 major airlines and recommended by the Federal Aviation Administration for industry-wide adoption. The program combined bias education, accountability procedures, real-time reporting, and federal compliance monitoring. Dr. Bryant's team had grown to include former federal investigators, civil rights attorneys, aviation safety specialists, and organizational psychology experts. Her consultants were embedded at airlines across the country, providing ongoing monitoring and immediate intervention when discriminatory practices were identified. We're not just solving problems after they occur, she told Aviation Week magazine during a cover story interview. We're preventing discrimination by changing the culture that enables it. The financial success of her consulting empire was remarkable, but Dr. Bryant measured impact in different terms. Discrimination complaints in commercial aviation had decreased by 71% since implementation of her protocols. Passenger confidence in airline civil rights protections had increased dramatically. Employee satisfaction scores showed improvement as workplace bias was eliminated. Robert Torres watched his wife's transformation from discrimination victim to industry reformer with admiration and amazement. 6 months ago, you were denied bathroom access by a biased flight attendant, he reminded her during a quiet evening at their Atlanta home. Now you're setting civil rights policy for the entire aviation industry. That's how change happens, Celeste replied thoughtfully. Someone with the right knowledge connections and determination refuses to accept unacceptable behavior. Then they use their platform to ensure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Dr. Bryant's influence extended far beyond aviation. The Department of Transportation had appointed her to the Federal Transit Civil Rights Advisory Council. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission consulted her on discrimination prevention strategies for transportation industries. Congress had invited her to testify at hearings on federal civil rights enforcement. Dr. Bryant has become the national authority on preventing discrimination in transportation services, announced Transportation Secretary Maria Rodriguez during a federal policy conference. Her expertise, experience, and commitment to reform are transforming how we protect civil rights in commercial travel. The consulting firm's success attracted attention from international aviation authorities seeking to improve their own civil rights protections. Dr. Bryant had consulted with airlines in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the European Union, spreading her reform model globally. Discrimination is a universal problem that requires universal solutions, she told the International Civil Aviation Organization during a policy summit in Montreal. The principles of dignity, respect, and equal treatment transcend national boundaries and cultural differences. Her academic work had also flourished following the Phoenix Airlines incident. Dr. Bryant had published 12 peer-reviewed papers on aviation civil rights, workplace bias prevention, and federal accountability mechanisms. Universities were incorporating her case study into business ethics, civil rights law, and organizational behavior curricula. The Bryant incident has become required reading in MBA programs across the country, noted Harvard Business School professor David Chen during a case study discussion. It demonstrates how individual accountability and federal intervention can transform entire industries. Dr. Bryant's professional recognition included the NAACP Freedom Award, the Department of Transportation Excellence in Civil Rights Award, and the International Aviation Civil Rights Achievement Medal. But the recognition that meant most to her came from passengers who'd experienced improved treatment because of her reforms. "I got a letter last week from a young black woman who was traveling with her elderly grandmother she shared during a conference keynote address. She wrote that airline staff treated them with respect and dignity throughout their journey. She didn't have to worry about discrimination, humiliation, or denial of basic services. That's the legacy I want from my experience." The Bryant Foundation, established with proceeds from her consulting work, provided legal aid to transportation discrimination victims and funding for civil rights research. The organization had assisted over 300 passengers in filing successful discrimination complaints and recovering damages from transportation companies. Dr. Bryant transformed personal trauma into universal progress, observed civil rights attorney Sarah Kim during a legal symposium on transportation equality. She didn't just seek justice for herself, she created systems to ensure justice for everyone. The consulting empire's success demonstrated that discrimination prevention was good business as well as moral necessity. Airlines implementing Bryant protocol reforms showed improved customer satisfaction, reduced legal liability, enhanced employee morale, and stronger federal compliance ratings. Treating all passengers with dignity isn't just the right thing to do, Dr. Bryant explained to airline executives during training sessions. It's profitable, sustainable, and essential for long-term business success. Her transformation from discrimination victim to industry reformer had taken 18 months and generated fundamental changes in commercial aviation. The woman who'd been denied bathroom access had become the architect of comprehensive civil rights protections for millions of travelers. Sometimes change requires someone with the right combination of knowledge, authority, and determination to refuse accepting unacceptable treatment, she reflected during a Harvard Business School guest lecture. Once you decide that dignity is non-negotiable, you can move mountains. Dr. Celeste Bryant had indeed moved mountains, transforming an entire industry and ensuring that no passenger would ever again face the discrimination she'd experienced aboard Phoenix Airlines Flight 847. 2 years after Jessica Martinez denied Dr. Celeste Bryant bathroom access on Phoenix Airlines Flight 847, the commercial aviation industry had undergone the most comprehensive civil rights transformation in its history. Federal regulators, industry leaders, and civil rights organizations declared the changes revolutionary, sustainable, and permanent. Dr. Bryant's incident created a watershed moment for transportation equality, announced FAA Administrator Lisa Rodriguez during the annual State of Aviation address. "We've established zero tolerance for discriminatory practices and comprehensive accountability measures that protect every passenger's dignity." The statistical evidence of transformation was overwhelming. Discrimination complaints across all major airlines had decreased by 78% since implementation of Bryant protocol reforms. Customer satisfaction surveys showed record-high ratings for fair treatment and civil rights protections. Employee training compliance exceeded federal requirements at every major carrier. Congressional oversight committees that had initially investigated Phoenix Airlines' discrimination practices now praised the industry's proactive commitment to civil rights protections. The House Transportation Committee issued a bipartisan resolution recognizing commercial aviation as a model industry for federal civil rights compliance. What began as a shameful incident of workplace discrimination has evolved into an inspiring example of comprehensive institutional reform, declared Committee Chair Maria Gonzalez during congressional hearings on transportation equality. Dr. Bryant's courage and the industry's response demonstrate that meaningful change is possible when leadership commits to justice. The financial impact of reform had exceeded all projections. Airlines implementing comprehensive civil rights programs reported increased passenger loyalty, reduced legal liability, improved employee retention, and enhanced brand reputation. The business case for equality was undeniable. Phoenix Airlines, once facing potential bankruptcy due to federal sanctions, had become the most profitable carrier in North America. CEO Robert Chen attributed the turnaround directly to civil rights reforms that attracted passengers and employees seeking respectful treatment. "Our commitment to dignity and equality isn't just morally right," Chen told shareholders during the company's record-breaking quarterly report. "It's the foundation of our business success." Passengers choose airlines that respect their humanity. International aviation authorities had adopted Bryant Protocol standards as global best practices for civil rights compliance. The International Civil Aviation Organization incorporated anti-discrimination training into mandatory safety curricula. Airlines worldwide were implementing real-time reporting and federal accountability measures. Dr. Bryant's influence has transformed civil rights protections, globally observed European Union Aviation Safety Agency Director Patricia Williams. Her protocols are now standard practice for carriers operating in 27 countries. The academic study of Dr. Bryant's case had generated new fields of research in organizational behavior, federal accountability, and discrimination prevention. Business schools, law schools, and public policy programs used her incident as a foundational case study for leadership ethics and social responsibility curricula. The Bryant case demonstrates how individual courage combined with institutional authority can create lasting social change, noted Stanford Graduate School of Business Professor Michael Torres during a symposium on corporate accountability. It's become required study for anyone seeking to understand effective civil rights enforcement. Technology companies had developed specialized software for real-time discrimination reporting, automated bias detection, and federal compliance monitoring based on Dr. Bryant's recommendations. The aviation industry had become a leader in civil rights technology innovation. Dr. Bryant's vision of immediate accountability through technology has revolutionized how we prevent and address discriminatory behavior, explained Civil Rights Tech Solutions CEO Angela Foster. Her specifications for reporting are now industry standard across multiple transportation sectors. The ripple effects extended far beyond aviation. Bus companies, rail services, cruise lines, and ride-sharing platforms had voluntarily adopted Bryant Protocol reforms to prevent discrimination incidents that could trigger similar federal investigations. Transportation equality had become a competitive advantage. No transportation company wants to become the next Phoenix Airlines, observed Department of Transportation Civil Rights Director Janet Torres. Dr. Bryant's case established precedent for swift federal intervention and comprehensive accountability that has motivated industry-wide reform. Professional associations had established the Bryant Award for Excellence in Civil Rights Leadership, recognizing individuals and organizations that demonstrated exceptional commitment to equality and dignity in transportation services. The annual ceremony attracted international attention and celebrated ongoing progress. Training institutions had developed specialized certification programs for civil rights compliance officers based on Dr. Bryant's consulting curriculum. Over 3,000 transportation professionals had earned Bryant Protocol certification, creating a workforce specifically trained to prevent and address discriminatory practices. Dr. Bryant didn't just solve a problem, reflected Civil Rights Training Institute Director Sarah Kim during a graduation ceremony for compliance officers. She created an entire profession dedicated to protecting human dignity in transportation. Media coverage of the ongoing transformation kept public attention focused on civil rights progress rather than just discrimination problems. Dr. Bryant's quarterly industry reports were covered by major news outlets maintaining accountability and transparency. The Bryant legacy represents hope in action, wrote Washington Post columnist David Chen in an editorial marking the second anniversary of the incident. It proves that individual courage, federal accountability, and sustained reform can eliminate institutional discrimination. Survey data showed unprecedented public confidence in aviation civil rights protections. Passengers from minority communities reported feeling safe, respected, and valued when traveling commercially. The fear and anxiety that had historically accompanied air travel for many Americans had been addressed. Dr. Bryant's personal satisfaction came not from media attention or professional recognition, but from letters she received weekly from passengers who traveled without fear of discrimination. "Yesterday I flew from Seattle to Miami as a black woman traveling alone," wrote one passenger. "The crew treated me with respect and dignity throughout the journey. I didn't have to worry about bias, humiliation, or denial of service. Thank you for making that possible." The lasting change was cultural as well as procedural. A generation of aviation employees had been trained to view civil rights compliance not as regulatory burden, but as professional responsibility. Equal treatment had become a point of pride rather than legal obligation. "We've created a culture where discrimination is not just prohibited but unthinkable," observed American Airlines Civil Rights Director Carmen Lopez during an industry conference. "Our employees understand that passenger dignity is fundamental to their professional identity." The transformation was complete, permanent, and continuously monitored by federal authorities committed to maintaining progress. Dr. Bryant's refusal to accept discriminatory treatment had created changes that would protect millions of travelers for generations to come. Commercial aviation had become a model industry for civil rights protection, institutional accountability, and cultural transformation. All because one woman decided that dignity was non-negotiable and had the knowledge and authority to enforce that principle at the federal level. 2 years later, Dr. Celeste Bryant walked through Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport toward her gate for a flight to Washington, D.C., where she would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to civil rights in transportation. As she passed the Phoenix Airlines check-in counter, a young Latina flight attendant approached her nervously. "Dr. Bryant," the woman whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm Sophia Martinez. Not related to... well, you know. I just wanted to thank you. Because of the training program you created, I know how to treat every passenger with dignity and respect. You changed everything. You gave people like me the tools to do better, and you protected passengers who couldn't protect themselves." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "My grandmother was discriminated against on a flight years ago, and there was nothing she could do about it. Now, because of you, that can never happen again." Celeste smiled warmly, placing a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder. She hadn't wanted to become a symbol or a crusader. She'd simply wanted to use the bathroom and be treated with basic human respect. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of refusing to accept the unacceptable. What happened at 35,000 feet that day wasn't just about one woman's right to use a bathroom. It was about every person who has ever been told they don't belong. Every individual who has been judged by their appearance rather than their character. Every human being who deserves dignity simply because they exist. Dr. Bryant hadn't just stood up for herself. She had stood up for the fundamental principle that respect is not earned through status or appearance, but owed to every person as a basic human right. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for clicks or views, but because dignity is non-negotiable and justice is possible when we refuse to remain silent. The next time someone tries to diminish your worth, remember that you might be the one person with the power to change everything. Your voice matters. Your stand counts. And sometimes the most important phone calls in history begin with just one person who decides they've had enough. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story inspired you. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of justice and accountability, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up for what's right can literally change the world. Thank you for watching, and remember, your dignity is never up for negotiation.